Hey everyone, welcome back. The focus changes in Eidolon hunting have been a very hot topic ever since Devstream 161. For this reason, this entire video is going to be revolving around the current state of hunting and what will happen with Angels of Zerimod moving forward. I will be keeping an opinion on the general focus changes for a separate video. We will look at the current capabilities with the upcoming changes in hunting, and there will be minimal actual theory crafting. And this means while we won't have some crazy stretch of builds and setups, there will still be some math, so that we can compare the then and now, and paint a realistic picture on what Focus 3.0 allows at face value. I want to remind you that the Devstream is Devshop material.
We will be listening to your feedback as well after.
Meaning it is subject to change, and DE is looking at feedback, so they claim. Whether they actually act on it or make things more tolerable is a different story, so remember, everything in this video is just an opinion, not a fact, and only expresses my own point of view and not the hunting community as a whole. I will be looking at this from both an experienced hunter and newer hunter perspective. They said focus will be refunded as Radiant Eidolon shards, so hopefully this inventory is enough convincing that I'm speaking from experience when we discuss Eidolons today. Finally, this video is both an opinionated piece on what I wish DE can change for the better to alleviate some of the hunter's concerns, but also an objective view on what we currently know and can use to get yourself best prepared for hunts moving forward, if nothing changes from what we saw. That is a big if, and that is the reason why my suggestions of setups moving forward will be much more general and not super technical like how Eidolon guides usually are. They will still probably be more technical than you expect, as it is Eidolons, but if you want a rough idea of how complex Eidolon guides can be, think back to any Eidolon guide or 6x3 roll guide you've watched, and think of why there are no solo guides, which combine all the rolls into one. Anyways, let's get started. I'm going over the Madurai focus school first, since that is where the major contention is. Quite frankly, it seems DE does not understand why the Eidolon meta exists in the form it does. Yes, it's to do faster runs, but the tools we have, they don't seem to understand why we use them that way. Reb said that during the dev stream that Void Strike promotes people to AFK camping to build up enough Void Strike stacks to one-shot with near infinite scaling. Not only do the changes ruin non-Eidolon related strategies for some leaderboard runs, but this is also the incorrect way to use Void Strike in hunts to start with. Learning to hunt is unlike anything else in Warframe. This is where a bit of harsh reality will have to be stated. Whereas the rest of Warframe is a boom and zoom game where very few things can hurt you and has minimal difficulty, Eidolons are the opposite. Yes, Steel Path gives the bare semblance of difficulty, but this is mainly just an incentive to actually learn the damage system and typing mechanics for stats that an actual difficulty mode, as, let's be real, nobody pays attention to their actual builds on the basic star chart to start with. Endurance is false difficulty, on the other hand, because it isn't designed to be run to level 9999, and therefore enemy values and stats are way higher than what the game is balanced around. Eidolons are currently the only game mode present that are designed to be difficult. Raids once were also through mechanics, but alas, they are no more. Eidolons are their legacy and are like an MMO. You cannot skip ahead in progression. Nothing you did before in the game carries over, because they're like MMO raids. Everybody starts equal and at the bottom. This is intentional by design. No, it's not bad design because it keeps it fair for everyone. Also, no, Eidolons are not mandatory contents, except crafting the Paracesis. But pubbing Terror List to get 10 Eidolon shards is extremely easy these days, and if you pay attention, it will become even easier with this update as I'm discussing. And Arcanes? If you want them, here's a TLDR. Stop farming Eidolons for Arcanes if that's all you care about. It isn't worth it. You can make Plat much faster to buy the Arcanes than farming the Arcanes. That 1200 Plat Energize, it might look pricey to you, but you know how long it takes for me to farm that when I was doing 3 to 4 6x3s a day? That means I gotta be online for, say, 10 hours, because I gotta log in for those night cycles. If I did that 3 to 4 times a day, it would take me 2 weeks. 2 full weeks for a rank 5 Energize to sell for 1200 Plat. You know how much Plat I could have made if I spent all those hunts farming relics and other stuff to sell for Plat? Probably well over 5,000. There's a reason why Energize is 1,200, and that's dirt cheap these days. If you want it, earn it. Farm the plat. This is the cheapest arcanes will ever be. There seems to be a very big misunderstanding about Eidolons. Not only does it have actual difficulty, unlike the rest of Warframe, but Eidolons are a skill-based game mode, not gear-based. Yes, gear matters, but only up to a certain point. People that do 3x3, read 3 sets of all 3 Eidolons in one night, use the same gear as people who chase 6x3. There are differences for people chasing world records, but that's not everyone, and honestly that's even a fraction of 6x3 hunters. Hopefully, the literally endless 6x3 playlist I have on my channel, which I'm sure most of you have seen by now, is a testament to that. I've spent a very long time trying to prove that gear only gets you so far in hunts, and practice, skill, communication, and patience makes up the rest. You do not need rivets. You do not even need a sniper. You do not need instant shield breaks and limb cracks. You don't even need all the way bounds. These are all just bonus advantages to make things as easy as possible. For you, if you want. That's why it's the meta. By extension, this means Void Strike is extremely heavily skill-based, because, well, people at 3x3 have Void Strike too. And it's probably one of the most skill-based quote-unquote techniques in Warframe. Yes, you can sum it up as it's dumb. All you do is hide to do more damage in Void mode. Anyone can do that. But if anyone can do that, how come so many people are stuck at 3x3 in 4-man teams? How come there are people that can do 6x3 solo? Rivens do not help you take shields down faster. The Eidolon community can be loosely divided into 2 groups. Well, 3, but the first group are the newbies. It's a very mixed bag or personalities, but any new hunter generally falls under here. The other 2 groups are the toxic and non-toxic. Ever heard of the phrase, the loudest voice is the vocal minority? I'm aware the Eidolon community gets a bad rap, but the vast majority of the people I've come across like this are those in the 3x3 or 4x3 zone. Whether it's because of self-projection of their inability to perform well, a narcissistic view that the reason why they are stuck there is always the team's fault and in absolutely no way possible could be theirs. An unwillingness to get better because they feel they deserve to be in a 5x3 without working for it? I don't know. But you need to realize that the people that can actually hold their own in a 5x3 grinded their way there. It takes hundreds of Hydralisks to get good enough to carry your team in a 5x3 as a VS. I've seen like triple digit numbers of decent hunters come and go in the speedrun community over the past several years. The number of people that are actually good enough to claim they could hold their own in a 5x3 in less than 50 caps, 50 Hydralisk captures by the way, and not on an alt account, I could count with my 2 hands. And anybody who has claimed it, and I've doubted, have failed when they tried to prove it. The biggest issue is people lying to get into speedrun groups, and then combining that with people stuck in 3x3 and 4x3 and venting their anger on their team, which is exacerbated by those other people also trying to sneak in. The vast majority of the people I've met at 6x3 are extremely chill and willing to teach. But the main issue is we see very few people making it there, because they have to make it past the 3x3, 4x3 clusterfuck ladder climb first. If you genuinely want to learn to get good at Eidolons, the resources are there. The Eidolon Discord servers are there. But you need to make the effort to make yourself known because, well, we won't know who you are unless you ask. Hopefully, this clears up a lot of misconceptions about the Eidolon hunting community. Now, here's the nice thing about this update. The Madurai changes will make casual hunting, and those that don't know the mechanics required for skill-based strats a lot easier. Void Strike was always dependent on time spent in Void mode. However, speedrunners don't AFK in Void. We do everything in Void. This was another thing I think non-hunters don't understand. You do 95% of the fight in Operator and speedruns, but this also means all the objectives, tasks, the nuances that may not be obvious need to be done while you're an Operator. But you also need to be charging Void Strike, which means you need to learn how to accomplish all the different tasks at the same time. Eidolons do not have an AFK time in speedrunning. That is why it's skill-based. Now, the new Void Strike, you get a massive 10 times damage boost without having to charge Void Strike like now, but it gets a 40-second cooldown. The thing is, this doesn't help Eidolon hunting at all. if you know what you're doing. No, I'm not talking about speedrunning. I'm talking about if you actually put together a meta setup and have a decent idea of what you're doing. You don't need to use it well, you just need to have it. A Clamora Prism, which is not what is currently part of the meta, by the way, currently absolutely annihilates all Eidolon shields. It isn't as fast as a Void Strike Propa Scaffold and Raplac amp parts that instantly one-shot, but for a casual runner, a Clamora Prism already easily clears the full shield in a few seconds, assuming you understand that you should be underneath the foot and shoot into the body for extra hitboxes. It currently takes out shields in about 3 seconds. Now let's look at the new Madurai tree again. I'm actually going to ignore Void Strike for a second. Here is Power Transfer. This buffs amp crit chance by 100% for 20 seconds on transfers. There doesn't seem to be a cooldown on this, and there's no reason to spend 20 seconds in your operator in a hunt, so you can always refresh this by switching back and forth. This node is also new. So this node is literally a built-in Unairu Wisp from the Unairu school, which upon pickup would normally buffs your amp damage by a bonus 100%. Yes, Power Transfer is only 100% crit damage buff, but it's still a buff similar in scaling to the Unairu Wisp. I'll get back to this a bit later, but this means the Madurai school now has a built-in Unairu Wisp kind of multiplier at all times, and it's separate from Void Strike and can also stack with an actual Unairu Wisp. So if you're soloing, now everybody will run Madurai because it literally has Unairu Wisp built into it. The biggest issue with solo Unairu runs at the moment is the hitbox on Water Shields. Water Shields is completely messed up and you can't take it out properly. But since everyone will be on Madurai now, you can activate the Void Strike ability to multiply all your damage by 10 times for the next 8 seconds. You will still run Virtuous Shadow to boost Propa Scaffold's crit chance to 80%. You can proc this by dashing at the shoreline where the Eidolon is coming out too. So you can spam as many Propas as you want now in that 8 seconds since there's no limit, and you should easily be able to blow up the entire Eidolon shield before it comes out of the water. This is a massive time saver compared to what Unairu currently has to do, and is similar to what Madurai can currently pull off. Later shields, you just Clamora up the heal like normal, and since you don't have a BS quote-unquote stack anymore, you can just Clamora the head to proc Virtuous Shadow. And if your Void Strike isn't on a 40-second cooldown, then just activate it, and instead of taking out the shields in 3 to 4 seconds, you'll take it out in half a second or less on Clamora, and still have a 10 times damage buff on your gun to shoot the limb. So as you can see, while you will not be able to one-shot every single shield anymore solo like how 6x3 solo Madurai speedrunners currently do, you can still take out shields faster than solo Unairu currently can. This means solo 6x3 is dead. But solo 5x3 is easier than before on Unairu and less crit RNG than Madurai currently, since you have unlimited shots in that 8-second buff window. And obviously means everything 4x3 and less will be easier as well. For all amps in general, the permanent 100% crit damage bonus and temporary 10 times damage buff is a massive buff overall to Eidolon hunting. The meta for solo runs will probably be a 777 amp, made with a Clamora to shred the normal shields, and Propa to get rid of the water shields while they're spawning, with the Certus Brace to buff crit chance. This requires Fortuna, so get farming Toroids for Little Duck rank 4. Essentially, the meta amp has not changed, since solo amps were already the 177 for Sweaty Madurai, with 777 on more chill Unairu runs. Now, what if we look at duo runs? Because of the cooldown on Void Strike, Unairu is dead for duos. The strategy will be both players on Madurai now. You will alternate shields you use Void Strike on. The DPS will still be responsible for gathering all lures and normal duo duties that exist in the meta right now, but will also have to activate Void Strike and shoot their Propa sometimes. The cooldown is 40 seconds, and the uptime is 8 seconds. A full rotation of an Eidolon shield in the current meta lasts 17.2 seconds if you play perfectly. A full Void Strike rotation on one player though, including the cooldown, will now take 48 seconds. 3 Eidolon shield rotations take 51.6 seconds. This means your Void Strike buff will only be active every 3 Eidolon shields if you're speedrunning in duos. But there are only 2 players. So how does this work? Simple. One player takes a shield, the other player takes the next shield, same as normal. The third shield though will be Clamora'd. This Claymore shield will take about 3 seconds to bring down, so this means on average every 3 shields, you will lose 3 seconds. There are other nuances to duo runs, but if I ignore everything else and only look at this is the most obvious time loss. If you lose 3 seconds every 3 shields, that means the entire run you will only lose about 18 seconds because of the Focus 3.0 rework. Why do people do duo runs? Because they're bored at the game and want to push themselves to the limit without subjecting themselves to the RNG amp crits of solo runs. This means duo runners are usually cream of the crop, best of the best. Let's look at the Eidolon speedrun side again. The golden standard to do a 6x3 is around 7 minutes and 30 seconds for the last limb break on Hydro. This stat here in this column. We're already come to an early conclusion that the focus school changes will only make you lose about 18 seconds. If you add 18 seconds to these runs, even if you say slower runs, 7 minutes flat for the last limb break on the Hydralisk, that still only increases the set time to 7 minutes 18 seconds, which is way under 7 minutes 30 seconds and means you will still easily get the 6x3. Therefore, will these focus reworks stop us from doing 6x3? No. And remember, I haven't considered any other new time-saving strats that we could find as a result of the focus rework. For 3-man and 4-man, it is largely the same. You just have one extra body to rotate Void Strike windows now. If anything, because there's a big cooldown on Void Strike now, you cannot get carried in hunts anymore and pretend you helped. You need to rotate Void Strike buffs, meaning when it is your turn to shoot, you're the only one shooting. So if you don't know what you're doing with your amp or don't shoot, it will be obvious you fucked up. This means if you actually want to get good at Eidolons, it's easier now than before because you don't need to burn a million energy pads to charge Void Strike, and you don't need to farm a million energy pads anymore either. But it also means if you want to just leech the run, it's no longer possible to hide it. It will be extremely obvious. So this will weed out the people that don't care. Yes, Eidolons became easier, but they did not become more brain dead. It is now more of a team effort. Now they require more coordination than they did in the past. But if you're going so slow it takes 40 seconds to take out one shield, more power to you, this will be a massive buff to you as well. So what can we conclude from this? From a purely Arcanes and Eidolon point of view, the focus changes have very little impact. You can still 6x3 in all setups, except solo, which was never intended to start with and is also an RNG-ridden mess. It's doable, but it's literal pain and is also the reason why I stopped trying way back. So if you just want to get in and do a 6x3, everything is fine, but the runs will be a little bit slower. You saw those leaderboards I looked at earlier for duo runs. Those times will become unbeatable. They will become legacied and new leaderboards will be made for post-Zerimon hunts. Honestly, this is fine, and I feel the hunting community at the top is very nostalgic and unwilling to accept the fact that updates can speed up or slow down hunts. There is nothing wrong with hunts slowing down. The leaderboards exist for the current state of the game and the current state only. Leaderboards are to track number 1 first and foremost, not absolute times. A slower run can still make number 1 after the updates. Absolute times are for legacy boards. This is something global to literally any game ever that has had speedruns. But there are people that only continue to hunt to chase times, the absolute fastest times, and will quit because they can't beat the pre-Zerimon times anymore. But that's your stance. There will always be more hunters. This is not the first time we've had a mass exodus. If you want to quit, then quit. There will be those that stick around to discover the new meta and teach the new generation. Honestly, I'm glad we finally have a shake-up of the hunting mechanics from a strategy perspective. It's been such a long time, and I'm sure there's a lot of hunters that will agree with me that the best time we had learning was how to get good enough and climb to 6x3. Leveling the field again is a good thing. You get that sense of progression back. But that doesn't mean that there aren't issues with the proposed update. The next section is the last, but it's also the section where I cover what DE could do to make the changes less destructive to current Eidolon hunting while still paving the way to new strategies and also being welcoming to more casual or new hunters while also not affecting normal gameplay. Void Strike. DE said they made it impossible to disable nodes. Please don't do this. There are always future implementations in the game that make it worth disabling nodes, due to lack of hindsight. Also, make it so that we can de-rank nodes as needed. We can't de-rank mods, but we can get duplicate mods to cater for every rank we want on Warframes. We've done this for stuff like Fleeting Expertise, Blind Rage, Transient Fortitude to hit specific percentage breakpoints on frame builds. Focus, on the other hand, is permanent. We don't have duplicate focus schools. Why am I asking this? Because look at this. 10% more damage per percent of your energy bar consumed for 8 seconds, and a 40-second cooldown. I have an interesting suggestion to put here. You have unranked, ranked 1, rank 2, and rank 3, so split these values into quarters. This means a rank 1 Void Strike will be 5% damage per percentage energy consumed, and it lasts only 4 seconds, and a 20 seconds cooldown, so basically half of the max rank on everything. I'm hoping the values scale like this. They might keep it permanent 40 seconds cooldown for all ranks, but I would strongly prefer the one I just suggested. You get a shorter cooldown at the expense of weaker buffs and shorter uptime, so 500% damage if you consume your entire bar for 4 seconds. That's enough to annihilate the shield still. This requires more skill to pull off effectively since your damage output is less, but in exchange you get a shorter cooldown, and if you cast at the wrong time, well, you're still screwed. In fact, with the 100% bonus crit damage that the power transfer node gives, you could probably use the unranked Void Strike if it gave 2.5% bonus damage per percent energy bar consumed for 2 seconds with a 10-second cooldown, so you get 250% damage scaling. That's more than enough. This is why I want the ranks of nodes to be toggleable. For people that want the big PP 1000% damage with big cooldown, they can do it. For people that want to min-max their cooldown timings for hunts, they can do that too. This is a happy medium to give normal gameplay loop of what people want while not destroying the existing concepts of DPS rotations and hunts, while still changing up the way how Void Strike works and requiring you to play well since the damage buff will be much lower if you choose to do so. Alternatively, if we cannot toggle the ranks of the Void Strike node, here's a different option. The Void Strike ability will become hold to cast. It drains operator energy as you hold it. Think of like Harrow's Thurible, maybe 4 seconds to drain the entire bar. So if you hold it for 2 seconds, you only drain 50% of the full bar. And 50% means you only get 50% of the buffs. So instead of 1000, you get 500% damage. Instead of 8 seconds, it only lasts 4 seconds. But instead of a 40 seconds cooldown, it only has a 20 second cooldown. If you hold it for 1 second only, you only drain 25% of your total bar. And you only get a 250% damage buff, lasting 2 seconds, with a 10-second cooldown. This will let you fine-tune how much energy you drain and how much a buff you get. Once again, a solution that allows you to get the massive 1000% buff, or even as small as a 1% buff, with a smaller cooldown the shorter you held it, and suits all combat situations. Adaptive, up to player choice. That's what we want, right? I didn't go over Unairu much because we came to the conclusion that in solo, Madurai is going to be king always now since it will be much easier to use than now, and also massively outdamage Unairu after the update since it has power transfer. And in duos, you will run double Madurai after the update. In 3-man and 4-man, you can use Unairu on the DPS wall for an even bigger amp buff with the Wisp if you want, but it isn't necessary. If you do want to use it though, I have one suggestion for the new method of getting Unairu Wisps. You got to use the caustic shot thing, which has an AoE to produce Wisps. The Wisps are stated to seek out the nearest ally within affinity range. How about it seeks out the nearest ally within range that doesn't have the buff already? Currently, it's already annoying managing Unairu Wisps in hunts because if somebody stands on the spawn point underneath the Eidolon, they will take all the Wisps and nobody else can get any, as the drop is not shared. Seeking allies out is a nice change, but because it only seeks out the nearest ally, now instead of making sure to not stand directly on top of the Wisp spawn underneath the Eidolon, you need to juggle who is the closest to the Eidolon, which is even more of a mess. If DE can't make it go to the closest player that doesn't have the buff, then just make it a global buff that applies to all allies within affinity radius. The current proposed mechanic of seeking closest ally just massively complicates things for no reason. You're also not going to use Unairu Wisp in normal gameplay anyways. Finally, the Void Dash Sling mechanic. Just make a toggleable feature in settings to use the new or old Void Dash. They're already very similar, just one is slower and lets you pick how far you want to dash. I don't see why you can't just reuse old code for the on-dash related ability activations or interactions. Besides that, there isn't much else I can say about the dash, as most of the time if you need to dash long distances it will be faster to just archwing. If you're doing water shields, yes, the old Void Dash from the shrine is still faster because it's not that far, compared to having to dismount from archwing, go to operator, lining up shooting your Propa through the Volt Shield instead of just dashing directly at it. Overall, I'm mostly indifferent to the Void Dash change. In the end, what does this focus update affect for Eidolon hunts? It only affects people chasing current world records and those chasing solo 6x3s. Everything else, it doesn't matter. It's still doable. Duo, trio, and 4-man 6x3 is still easy. You just rotate stacks now, which is the same as the strats from back in 2017. So you just can't leech. We're just reverting to old ancient setups, and for the bottom end, if you're still climbing the ladder at say 3x or 4x, this is a massive buff and a very good thing. It makes it easier for you to grasp the ropes and less of a grind to learn how to perform the meta strats properly. If you're earlier on your Eidolon journey, then the 10 times damage buff will greatly help you take down shields. The meta amps? The 777 Clamora Prism, Propa Scaffold, Certus Brace is the main one now. 177 is still usable, but just less useful. I have my own opinions on what is being done to chase the leaderboard runs at the moment. Honestly, I don't care for that 646 run here being unbeatable in the future after Zerimon. I don't even care that sub 7 runs are going to be extremely rare after the update. Legacying and leaderboard resets due to quote-unquote new strats is good. We still have 6x3. That is my final opinion. If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. 79.5% of you are not subscribed. I'm trying my best to get you new information out always as soon as possible. Like I've done with covering the new augments, Garuda's rework, and upcoming Angels of Zerimon update. Stick around if you want to see interesting memes and builds on a nearly daily basis. You don't want to miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.